Alright guys, this is probably going to be a super wonky video, but I'm just going to go for it anyway. It actually kind of suits the topic. And this video is about the current Mercury retrograde that we are in. I've got this beautiful sage stick. And I wanted to speak to it because I feel like this Mercury retrograde cycle is quite different. I actually made an Instagram story about this earlier, but then I deleted it because I realized I wanted to make it a YouTube video because I think it's something that I myself, and maybe you, will be frequently revisiting over these next few weeks of Mercury retrograde. So when we hear about Mercury retrograde, a lot of people talk about, there are some common symptoms of Mercury retrograde. Mercury has to do with communication, and when there's a retrograde, everything's kind of moving backwards. So there can be a tendency for backwards communication, meaning that you want to be really aware of any contracts you sign or any deals that you go into. Also, a lot of people talk about the resurfacing of your exes, whether that's for better or for worse. A lot of people talk about technology breaking down and being extra careful with your phone and your computer and your car, anything that allows you to communicate and transport. And I feel like this Mercury retrograde is actually quite different. And I'm speaking for myself, but I do think it's also a collective trend because I've heard it from quite a few others as well. And that is that this cycle, it started on February 16th, I believe, correct me if I'm wrong, and it goes through near to the end of March. It's about our own old stories and patterns surfacing and rearing their head, trying to pull us back into an old way of being. And I can super relate to this in my own life because personally, especially over these past few weeks, I've been feeling like there's been a lot of internal expansion happening for me, a lot of healing, a lot of culminating, a lot of gathering, and a lot of growing and healing. Did I already say that? Clearly it's important. And I noticed in these past few days, I've been getting in these slumps, very energetic slumps, and I'm grateful that because I was in an expansion, not because, honestly, I've noticed them at least. I've had awareness of them, and I've been able to kind of communicate to myself, be like, hey, Kelly, that's not how you're committed to showing up. What is that about? What's going on here? And I don't like to ever blame anything on an astrological cycle because that's another thing with the whole Mercury retrograde and all this stuff. To a certain extent, if we think that we're going to get that in our reality, of course we're going to get it. If we keep reading all these things about Mercury retrograde, then it's going to become a self-fulfilling prophecy, right? I'm more passionate and inspired about how can we see the challenges that are available and utilize them as an opportunity to grow. So for me, I'm seeing that a really big challenge for this retrograde cycle that we're experiencing is coming up against our own personal self-sabotage patterns. And I find this really interesting that it's happening as we enter into Pisces season, because Pisces is such a beautiful, intuitive energy. It's so sentimental and spiritual and interconnected. However, Pisces is super susceptible to delusion and believing things that aren't true, convincing oneself emotionally, building a story, collecting evidence about things without actually getting the facts, without actually being grounded and rooted. So we are all kind of susceptible to that energy right now of believing things that aren't true. And I think a lot of this it can of course become externalized, but I believe that if you're externalizing this onto other people and projections in your life, your relationships, your work, it's got to be happening in you, or else you wouldn't be able to do that, right? So I think we're all facing this opportunity to really choose what kind of life do we want to live. What are our spiritual values? What are our spiritual morals? And what are physical ways that we can devote and dedicate to those? Because there is this susceptibility to a lot of fear right now in the collective and self-sabotage of the things that we are growing. So I want to share this from my heart to yours and from my own experience to yours. If you are feeling like you've been making a lot of progress in some area and then all of a sudden you're just like, oh fuck, I can't do it. That was all a dream, it's not real, and you catch yourself in these patterns, accept them, hear them, but don't feed them. And this is what I've been practicing as I've been really growing into this self that's emerging through me, and I can feel her communicating to me from the ethers, from my intuition. And then these old patterns come up of some of my patterns, right, are self-worth, insecurity, self-doubt, also like being very critical of how I show up and what I'm doing and the impact that has. And what I've been practicing is leaning into my higher self, leaning into this emergent self who is showing me the way and letting her take the reins. And it's not about demonizing these voices. It's not about trying to like kill the ego. It's about saying, all right, I hear that there's, maybe you've heard the myth of the good wolf and the bad wolf. I think it's an ancient Native American analogy. And they say, there's two wolves in all of us, the good wolf and the bad wolf. It's about feeding the good wolf. That's a very abbreviated version. And that's what we can do. We don't have to shun the bad wolf because it's hungry and it's trying to, feed this part of us that is anchored in self-sabotage, which I believe all of us have, because it's actually what makes us great, because it forces us to choose ourselves and choose our growth. We can hear that voice, but we don't feed it. We accept it, we're present with it, we ask it what it wants to tell us, but then we lean into and we feed and we stretch our palms out to the good wolf, the wolf that gives us our fighter, our spiritual warrior, our volition, our self-worth, because no one in this world is going to be negatively impacted by you having positive self-worth and by you believing in yourself. And if they're trying to convince you of that, that's just bullshit. And that doesn't mean that they're bullshit, it's a story that you can choose to buy into or not. So, I don't actually know where that came from. It came through. Maybe someone needed to hear that. I don't know. It doesn't actually pertain to my life right now, but that's another thing as well, like why I make these videos, why I show up on these platforms, because that's something I can have some questioning around sometimes, to be honest, guys. I can be like, well, why am I doing this? And my lower self can have very disempowering stories, but my true self and my essential self, I like that. My essential self shows me that I'm a messenger. And I was talking about this to a client today, actually, on one of our sessions. If we feel like we are a messenger in some way, shape, or form on this planet, if we are not sharing that in some way, it starts to eat us alive. And the nature of the work that I do, I'm actively tapping into the collective energies. I'm actively tapping into the cycles. And it impacts me. Like in these past few days, I've noticed a huge shift in my body, in my digestion, in my face, and I haven't been actually doing anything really different. And I feel like it's because I've owned and taken on this role of being a collective messenger of some sort. And when I express in this way and I let it come through and share to the collective on the platform where people are coming to watch, that's my way actually of like taking a bit of the weight off my shoulders, because it's a message that wants to be shared so that we can all rise together, so that we can all heal, so that we can all know we're not alone and that we are all impacting each other. And the more aware we all become of our own personal cycles and energy and the choice that we have amidst all of this, I feel like that's really what sacred duty is. It's showing up where we are with what we've got, with who we have, and being of soulful service, because this does benefit me as well. I really hope that it supports you guys to deepen and have self-care and to look out for yourselves, and it also supports me because it's like beckoning me, if that makes sense. And if any of you are interested in that more, if you feel like you have a role on this planet as a sacred messenger, I really love supporting people into that role. I'm getting on a tangent here. Mercury Retrograde. Yeah, I just wanted to shine this light on this cycle because for me, it's a huge way to navigate the highs and lows. And with that being said, I'll also share some practices that I find can be really supportive if you are noticing that you're kind of getting caught up in this Piscean, like watery, delusional, bouncing, like kind of like self-depreciation and then externalize, or like maybe you're feeling this flux and flow of emotion. What I find really powerful is doing things a little bit differently than you normally would. For one, Mercury retrograde really favors when we take backwards approaches. So maybe change up your commute to work, or change up what you have for breakfast. Sometimes these little things can physically anchor you and counterbalance a lot of the astrological energies that are happening. I always favor going for very vibrant, alive, high vibe foods as well. That really grounds me because I'm super susceptible to like sugar, and that can be one of my biggest downfalls. Is I'll go for the banana bread and then the second cup of, you know, hot cocoa that has a little sugar in it, and it's not good for me. Like I really feel the effect. So sometimes it's fine, and I talk about that in other videos, but high vibe foods can really anchor and ground you. I would even say, like, maybe embracing a bit of a pescatarian diet during this because of the Piscean energy. If you're not like a strict vegetarian or vegan. Gosh, communication is really interesting for me today. This is actually my 4th time attempting to make this video, guys, and again, my self-sabotage came up, and it's like, just don't make it. But it was actually painful for me not to make it. So here I am again, and we're already at 11 minutes and 30 seconds, so whoever's still watching this, you are a champion. High vibe foods, grounding foods, stay away from like artificial ingredients because they can kind of throw you into a bit of a spiral. Dancing is a great one for me. Anything that connects me to what's actually happening in my reality. And like feeling powerfully anchored in my physical reality. I'm actually in a squat right now, making this video standing up. Having a sensual or sexual energy cultivation practice, self-pleasuring practice, is also really powerful in that regard, to circulate your energy, to feed your energy centers. And leaning into your supports, whatever that is for you. A big one for me is nature. I would be getting in the ocean every single day if I was near the water. I actually might be moving near the water in a few days. Lean into your mentors, your guides, whether that's one-on-one or even just through like watching an empowering documentary or doing journaling prompts or reading something, watching inspirational YouTube videos, something that just helps you reconnect to your bigger vision, because right now it's like we're swimming through the seas and there's a lot of fear, there's a lot of potential for sabotage, so we want to keep our aim focused on that voice that empowers us the most and trust him or her. Trust fucking fiercely. And accept these patterns that come up of sabotage and old stories, but don't feed them. Love them and let them go. Love them and leave them. And make that conscious choice to choose who has the reins over your actions and your thoughts, because it really is a choice. And God, maybe there's some of you listening to that be like, yeah, sure, easy to say, Kelly, but you know, I went through that and I still do, where I'm like, well, that's easier said than done. But to be honest, yeah, okay, maybe it is easier said than done, but that doesn't mean we shouldn't do it. We can always take that choice to say, wow, I'm really fucking in a spiral right now, so I'm going to show up for myself. And I'm gonna put on that music. I'm going to let myself have an intentional container to cry. I'm gonna call my mentor. I'm going to get myself out into nature. I'm gonna throw myself into some freezing cold water. We have that choice, and that when we make that choice, even if it feels like the fucking worst thing ever, we grow and we gain resilience. It's just about making the choices again that support your blossoming, that empower you, and when those voices crop up that try to convince you otherwise, don't give in to the sabotage. Yeah. I'm gonna end this now. I hope you're all having a wonderfully wacky, wild day, or a calm, peaceful day, or an insightful, grounded day, or an emotional day. I hope you're having whatever day you need to be having. And I'll see you on the next video.